Well, hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 5, which is gender. Oh, here we go. So what about the terms gender versus sex? Sex implies the characteristics of males and females that have a biological basis. So that includes your physical features, your chromosomes, gene expression, hormones, anatomy. Whereas gender implies the characteristics of males and females that may be due to cultural and social beliefs, influences, and perceptions. So really the socially constructed roles, behavior, and expression of girls, women, boys, and men, as well as gender diverse people. So in terms of adolescence and gender in traditional cultures, when females move from childhood, from being a girl to a woman, in traditional cultures, girls experience a narrow socialization. They spend a lot of time working alongside their mothers or potentially other adult women doing more traditional types of tasks. Whereas in traditional cultures, moving from boy to manhood, manhood is something that needs to be achieved. Whereas girls, there's a clear biological marker of womanhood in terms of starting to menstruate. Whereas with boys, there's not that biological kind of marker. And so manhood is something that needs to be achieved. And males, as they move into the adult role, are required to provide economically for oneself as well as a wife and children, protect one's family and community from human and animal attackers, and procreate. So the requirement to be able to function sexually well enough to perform or to produce children. And so these are really things that boys learn as they move into manhood. In terms of adolescence and gender in traditional cultures, in developing cultures, adolescent girls have much less in the way of educational and occupational opportunities. And economic development in these countries can level the gender roles in terms of the playing field and more opportunities for girls and young women. What about adolescence and gender in American history? So kind of moving from girl to woman, in the 18th and 19th century, there were very few occupational options. Adolescent girls were considered fragile and very innocent, and it was important for adolescent girls to maintain their virginity until marriage. From moving in this adolescent from boys to men in the 17th and 18th century, there was this idea of communal manhood, which the focus of gender expectations for adolescent boys was preparing to assume adult male role responsibilities in work and marriage. This changed in the 19th century into what we call self-made manhood, the goal for males to be increasingly expected to become independent from their families in adolescence and in emerging adulthood as becoming part of a man. So you sort of start your own independent career, job, etc. And then in the 20th century, this sort of changed into what's called passionate manhood. Self-expression and self-enjoyment replaced self-control and self-denial as the important virtues that young males should learn. So who do you want to be? What do you want to do? Those being more important than the controlling and just, well, this is what I need to do. I need to take this job in order to provide, etc. Of course, as we discuss all of this concept of gender, there are so many variations and there is so much variability. We're talking here in definite generalizations as we have this discussion of gender. Let's see. Recent trends in American cultural beliefs about gender. There's a trend towards more egalitarian or more equal attitudes about gender, what boys and girls and men and women can do. Although 1/4 to over 1/3 of Americans continue to believe, have beliefs about gender roles, similar to what we see in traditional cultures, that, females should watch the children and stay home and cook and clean, and it's up to the males to protect and provide and all of that. So 1/4 to 1/3 of Americans continue to have those beliefs, but we are moving towards these more equal roles. Women and girls should go to school, can be doctors, may not want to have children, maybe men want to stay home with the children. All of that is changing over time. The gender intensification hypothesis. This is the hypothesis that psychological and behavioral differences between males and females become more pronounced at adolescence because of intensified social pressures to conform to culturally prescribed gender roles. So in childhood, children are more apt perhaps to do whatever they want, have fun, play with whatever toys, play with whoever they want to play with, kind of be who they want to be. But then in adolescence, they start to internalize based on cognitive functions that are getting more advanced as well. They start to internalize societal and cultural roles that are shown maybe in the media, on the internet, by watching others. And then they may start to internalize and change their behaviors basically to conform to those roles. And they may see traditional gender roles in their family, from their peers, from school, like I said, media, etc. And they may start to then kind of internalize, what does it mean to be a female in our society? What does it mean to be a male in our society? So media and gender also promotes gender stereotypes, like I said, in social media. Certainly see very pronounced gender stereotypical photos that adolescents may be seeing. And there's a big focus on physical appearance in social media that may produce body image issues, particularly among girls. And now with all of the camera filters and things like that, that really people end up posting and individuals end up seeing very kind of highly distorted, not realistic images of what and a girl or a woman, and I'm putting that in quotes, is supposed to look like in our country. It can lead to very expectations that are impossible to achieve. And so, again, education is extremely important for and for girls and boys. Same thing with boys, very stereotypically male type photos. Again, they might be photoshopped or filtered with that are just impossible to achieve, and those become a way that can really impact body image of adolescents. In terms of gender socialization as a source of problems for girls, there's a real focus on physical appearance, that this is how a girl, again, should look, and should in quotes. And for boys, there's more of a focus on being aggressive and assertive. And again, that can be a problem. if taken to an extreme. So in terms of masculinity, femininity, and androgyny, there is a questionnaire called the BEM Sex Role Inventory that measures gender role perceptions. And so individuals kind of mark off what traits apply to them. And there are these expressive traits that are applied to females. So traits like gentle, yielding, those are more often ascribed to females, emphasizing more of emotions and relationships as being important feminine qualities. Whereas more instrumental traits seem to be more applied to males, so characteristics like self-reliant, forceful, those are more often ascribed to males, emphasizing the importance of action and accomplishment in terms of our gender role perceptions. And in terms of a gender ideal, perhaps the healthiest personalities are a combination of both these masculine and feminine traits, which leads to this word androgyny, a combination of masculine and feminine personality traits. Gender nonconformity and transgender adolescence. We may need to move beyond the binary categories of male and female, and in fact, in many places, we really have at this point. So gender nonconforming, those are people who typically identify as either male or female, but whose behaviors are more androgynous and to a degree fall outside the conventional norms. Transgender, people whose self-identification does not match their biological sex. And transsexual, people who experience a fundamental mismatch between their gender and their sex, and who may address this misalignment through physical transformation, ranging from wearing clothes that are characteristic of the other sex to sex reassignment surgery. So individuals who are gender nonconforming in some way or transgender face a lot of challenges. They're at risk for verbal and physical aggression. We see they're more likely to be homeless. They have a higher risk of suicide. But there is research on the resilience of these individuals in spite of all these challenges, and that many of them are actually really strong, really resilient inside, and make it through all of these challenges in a very positive way. So gender stereotypes in emerging adulthood, as we move into adolescence and emerging adulthood, social psychologists have focused quite a lot on gender stereotypes. College students often evaluate women's work performance less favorably than men's, although this difference is greater in younger adolescents than emerging adults. So if they show college students an essay written by Jane or written by John, and it would be the same essay, college students often rate that essay better when it's written by what they think is a man versus a woman. But we know there are more similarities than differences between gender, and stereotypes are really the result of gender schemas and roles that have long-standing kind of influences into our beliefs. And you can see here like math scores, female and male students, even though in this case males and females, the difference was statistically significant, with males performing a little better in math than females, you can see the huge amount of overlap between the two groups. It's just a slight difference. So why do these stereotypes exist if there is such a small difference between genders? So our gender schemas, we notice and remember information that's consistent with our gender schemas. So we remember gender stereotype behavior. If we have a thought in our mind that Females are more caring, and then more emotional, and then we see a female being emotional, we tend to remember that. And if we think that males are more assertive in our schema, and then we see a man being assertive, we tend to remember that, and that reinforces these gender stereotypes in our mind. Also social role theory, that there's different gender socialization that leads males and females to develop different skills and attitudes, which then leads to different behaviors. For example, as children are young, we very often buy dolls for girls and tools for boys. And so as they're playing with their toys as young children, if you have a doll, what are you typically going to do? Take care of it, dress it, feed it, and then children learn those behaviors. Versus if you have a tool set, right? You're going to learn how to hammer and use a screwdriver and use a wrench. And then those are skills that you learn. And so because of this gender difference in gender socialization from very early on, these can lead to very different behaviors as individuals get older. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.